And so on to the cylinder head. So the cylinder head really confirms the fact that this engine has had a very hard life. Out of for a start, all the threads in the head, there's only two that haven't been header coiled. So all these three outer rocker box have been header coiled. These three outer rocker box have been header coiled. These two inner rocker box have been header coiled, and the only two that haven't are these two on the inner rocker box on the inlet side. All the spark plug threads have been header coiled at some point in the past. So I know that Dave Smith, I think he header coiled all the outer threads, but two have been done already, and all the spark plugs threads have already been done, which suggests that this engine has indeed had a hard life, but we'll bring it back, no problem. So what have we had done? So we've had all new valve guides fitted. These are oversized valve guides, so they fit snugly into the head. And we've had them made with lips so that they will take valve stem oil seals. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit oil seals to both the inlet and the exhaust. Now, normally you would only fit valve stem seals to the inlet and not the exhaust. And the idea is that when the inlet, one of the inlet valves opens, then the engine is sucking air in, and it sucks oil and air and oil down the valve stem, because of course that's what the engine is doing. When the valve opens, the piston's going down and it's sucking things into the combustion chamber, and it sucks the oil in. So you really only need them on the valve stem, because of course when the exhaust valve stem opens, the engine is on the exhaust stroke and it's pushing all the stuff outwards, and so it's not sucking it in, it's blowing out. But belts and braces, I'm going to put them on the exhaust stems as well. So we're going to have valve seals on all the valve guides. Then also, another sign of a slightly hard life, we've given it a light skim to get it flat. So that's all ready now. We know that they're not going to leak oil, or that the gasket's not going to go generally. And then, because there's been new valve guides fitted, all the valve seats have been recut to fit the new valves. Because when you have a new valve guide fitted, ever so slightly, it will just change the angle. And if you don't recut the seats, then the valves will never seal properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bit of valve grinding paste. We'll do this later on. We'll put some valve grinding paste on and just grind the valves in, just to make sure they're absolutely spot on. And that's about it. Okay, that's like an introduction to the cylinder head, what we're going to be doing. Obviously we've got new valves, we've got all new valve springs as well, because the springs were looking tired. So we've got new valves, new valve guides, new valve springs. So I think it'll be really good when it's done. Oh yeah, and you can see these holes. These are the infamous oil drain holes that can cause leakage problems. So that's where the oil starts, and it pools there, makes a pool, and you don't want it to pool there really. So there's a drain hole, and those drain holes come out at the bottom of the cylinder head, and then they go into those dowels on the barrels, down through the barrels and back to the crankcase. But they can leak, as you can see. Some of them very close to the edges, and so you need to make sure you're going to get a good seal. As I said before, in my case I use a composite gasket with well seal, and I've never had any problems, touch wood. But you do have to be careful to make sure that these don't leak. That's where they tend to leak from. Right, continuing with the cylinder head, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fit the new valves. Got lovely new valves here, 3 new inlet valves and 3 exhaust valves, all looking good. And because we've had new valve guides fitted, then they've recut the seats I think I said before, because you have to do that if you fit guides, because there was a slightly different angle. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to grind each valve in, just give them a very light grind, just to check that they're seating perfectly on the new recut seats. Right, so we're going to give the valves, just grind them in lightly just to make sure that they're fully seated. So I've got some grinding paste here. We've got fine and coarse. We're not using the coarse because the seats are already cut and I'm pretty sure everything's fine. I'm just giving things a light grind, so just taking a little bit of grinding paste, putting it around the edge of the one of the valves, the inlet valve in this case. Yeah, and then got my suction sticker here, got different suctions either end. I'm going to suck it, oops, not quite straight, but never mind, don't matter. Put it in the valve guide, and then like you're lighting a fire, pick it up, turn it, pick it up, turn it every so often, pick it up and turn it. Just keep doing that for a bit. And then what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a nice grey finish on the valve and on the cylinder head, on the valve seat. That tells me if I've got a nice even grey finish, then I know that they're all, both mating surfaces are fully flush with each other and sealing really well. That's looking good now. You might see that it's nice and grey and even. Yeah, I'm happy with that now. So the next thing I've got to do is you've got to make doubly sure that you then wipe all of the grinding compound off. Needless to say, because it is a grinding compound, that's what it's for. So obviously it will cut into metal. I'm just looking at that edge. That's a really nice edge now that I've got on there. You can see it's all grey, it's all even, and that means it's going to seal really nicely. I'll give that a full clean, and obviously clean out the cylinder head, the valve seat. What I'll do is I'm wiping these down now, and then I'll get some white spirit on it as well, make sure they're absolutely clean, and then I'll fit the valve. And I'll do this to each valve in turn. I'll fit this valve now so that I don't get them mixed up. So now I've cut this valve in, I'll clean it all out, and then what we're going to do is we'll fit this, then we're going to fit this valve before going on to grind out the next valves. This is the order of assembly of the valves. We're now going to put the valves into the cylinder head. So you've got valve, then you've got the bottom collet or collar for that the springs sit on. Then you've got the outer and the inner spring. Then you've got the top collar, and then you've got the collets that fit in the groove of the valve and jam against the top collar, and that's what holds the valve in place. Now I was going to do this yesterday, but I've had to wait for parts because I had to order these new bottom collars, because I went to put them in and found out that the originals, for some reason, they've been roughly ground out. The centre has been ground out. I have no idea why. So that now, if you put the collar on, it is way too big. It should be a snug fit over. Should be a snug fit over the valve guide, like the new ones. Yeah. So I have no idea why. I can't think of any reason why they were ground out, but they all are. Every single one's ground out. And to my mind, that's not going to help much. It's just going to mean that the spring can slide. So I've had to order all new ones of those, which have now come. So that's a bit of a mystery. The second thing is that the valve guides, valve springs, are progressive. At least the outer ones used to be, but according to this, I think the inner ones are as well, because they're painted. Now, generally, if a valve spring is painted, that's to tell you that that is the side that goes down towards the cylinder head, because that is the end that the spring is more coiled at, and it's more open at the other end. You know, it's difficult to tell on these, but and I'm not sure, but certainly there's paint on. So if there's ever paint on a valve spring, you always put that downwards towards the top of the head, because it should be closer springs at the bottom and more open springs towards the top, although it's difficult to tell on these. See, one thing I forgot in that little line up showing the valve assembly was, of course, the oil seals that go on top of the valve guides. Okay, and there's a groove in the valve guide, and these just push on, and then there's a lip. It went on a bit faster than I expected, so it's done. Because what I was going to say is that once these are on, you don't want to start messing about taking them off. No, that's not true. You know, you can take them off. My apologies, it's come off. What I meant was, once you've inserted a valve through, you don't want to be taking the valve back out. There is, of course, this gap here for the collets, and it's like a chamfered end this end, but a sharp end that end. Now, once you put the valve through the oil seal, if you then want to pull it out again, then you've got this sharp edge against the edge of the oil seal, and so you don't want to come out and you can damage it pulling it out. So ideally, put these on when you're ready, and then put the valve in, but then try not to take the valve out again, because you can damage them. Yeah, and also, and we'll go through the order in a minute, but basically put the bottom sort of washer, the bottom collet, can't think of the word, but that bottom ring, put that on first, and then the oil seal, because you often find that, I'm not sure in this case, but often you can't get that washer on over the oil seal, and if you jam the oil seal on really tight and you can't get it off, then that's a real pain. Okay, I hope you'll be able to see all this. I'm going to start off, I'm going to put a little bit of lube on the valve guide, on the valve stem, get it right, because it's a new build. You obviously really don't have much oil on a valve, because that's what gets burnt in the engine. But a bit of oil on. Going to put the new collar, which actually fits around the valve guide, unlike the old originals. Then I'm going to put an oil seal on top. These don't seem to be very tight, but I'm sure that is on. But sometimes when they go on, that's it, you can never get them off again. But that does appear to be on. Then I get the valve, which I have ground in, and just twist it up through the oil seal. It will fall out of it, but that's fine. Then I get my inner spring, paint side down, and outer spring. Just make sure they're seated. Make sure the inner spring's seated. Then the outer spring. Okay, and then I get the top washer. I can't really think there's a proper name for these, and it won't come. Collar, I'm not sure. Right, okay, can we see that? I think you can probably just about see that. I'll try and move the camera a bit. It's difficult. Right, and then I've got my valve spring compressor, Okay, so I'm going to loosen it off a bit, open it out, and then this end goes on the end of the valve, goes on the valve itself. I'm trying to think of the word, can't. I've probably opened it out too much now. There. So that's clamped on the bottom of the valve, and then we've got the top here around the valve stem. Can we see that? Let me just, it's very difficult to see what on earth I'm doing on this camera. Yeah, okay. Now what I need to do is compress the spring further. So I've got this, and what I do is I'm going to screw this up now. And as I screw it up, it will slowly compress the springs, the valve springs. And I'm going to compress it quite a way. You often tend to have to compress these more than you think. And I'm compressing it until I can see the groove on that on the valve stem there. Okay, because what I'm going to try and do now then is slip the collets in. The collets, these two little half collets, around the valve stem where that little sort of ground out bit is. Yeah, so there's one in, I don't know if you can see, that's around the back of the valve stem, and now there's a second one. It's fairly obvious, by the way. It's there's a thick end and a thin end, and obviously you put the thin end in first, like cone shape. That's what jams them in against that top collar. Move this over a bit to make room for the second collet. There, it's in. Right, so both collets, I'm not sure how I can see that. Let's see if I can zoom in. Probably not. I can zoom in, but then I don't know if you can see. So there's these two collets, and they're around that sort of shouldered part of the valve stem. And then I can, well, I'm going to start unwinding the, I'll have to come back out again now. Going to start unwinding this so that the let the valve springs come back up again. And as they do, that top, I can just release the whole thing now. And there we have it. And the valves that are now, the valve is now held in place. Those collets have jammed in that top washer, collar, whatever it's called, and so the valve's now in. And then what I tend to do is, that'd be nice to do it on this camera. Okay. Oops a daisy. I'll then give it a good couple of whacks to make sure it's seated. I just check the springs are seated, and that's it done. And then I'll just do that another 5 times. Things to watch for, not so bad with these. Make sure you don't scratch the surface of the cylinder head with the valve compressor, but that's about it really. It's just a fiddly job. It's a fiddly job. It's very straightforward. Okay, and so I'll carry on and do the other 5. Oh, and another little thing, if you can't get the collets in, the chances are you've simply not tightened up the valve compressor enough. You know, if they're struggling, they don't seem to want to go in, simply simply put a couple more turns on that thread, compress them a bit more, and you'll find they'll slip straight in. Okay, so all the valves are now in, all nice, new and shiny, and check they're all seated properly, all jolly good. And so we'll be putting the cylinder head on. Before we do that, just a note, we have a skim of the cylinder head so we know it's nice and flat. That will help to seal so that it won't leak from the cylinders, and also it won't leak oil. We've got a composite gasket. I use composite. There are 3 types of gasket. There's copper, composite like this one, and chromatic. Right, so copper, that's a solid copper as used originally. The advantage of those is that you can reuse them. So once you've used them once, when you go to use them again, you anneal them, so heat them up to a cherry red and then let them cool or dip them. Then you can put them back on, and you normally use what's it called, a copper coat, I think. You put like a sealant, you spray a sealant on the gasket, a little sealant. And a lot of sort of traditional sort of engine builders, they swear by copper because that's what they grew up with and that's what they've used, and so you'll have a lot of sort of old timers will always just use copper. I'm a fan of composite because I've used them several times and they just never leaked oil. The disadvantage as opposed to copper is number one, you have to, because they crush down a bit, you do have to torque the head down a bit more often. So what I do is, just as a general thing by the way, is I will start the engine and then leave it run for not long, a couple of minutes at most, turn it off and then re-torque the head and readjust all the valve, all the tappets, because it's amazing on that first few minutes starts up, everything kind of settles down. Then I re-torque this after 50 miles or so, and then after 200 odd or 250, and then that's it. Whereas copper, you don't tend to have to torque it down as much. Yeah, and I forgot to then go on to mention in the video that there's also the 3rd type of gasket is called the chromatic gasket. Chromatic is a company in America, and that's the name of the company, the Chromatic Gasket Company. So I've never used a chromatic gasket, but from what I understand, they're very good if you've got a cylinder head that you're worried about sealing. I think they're quite expensive gaskets, but they're basically like a sandwich. So there's metal either side and some sort of goo, some sort of sealant in the middle. And when you tighten them down, I think it sort of breaks the seal, and so the goo comes out and seals everywhere. But I have no personal experience of using them, so I can't say. But that's the 3rd type of gasket. So you can either use copper or composite or chromatic as your cylinder head gasket. The cylinder liners, I don't think I've mentioned these before. Ours are nice, very nice. They're absolutely basically level with the top of the barrels, which is great. They can stick up slightly, protrude slightly out of the barrels, but only slightly. The advantage of that is that you'll then get a really nice compression seal around the gasket. The disadvantage is if they protrude too much, then the rest of the gasket won't seal around those pesky oil holes, because of course it'll be pushing down on the liners and not on to this surface. So it's best that it's flat. You don't want your liners really below this surface, because then obviously when you clamp things up you can have gas leak, compression leak from the cylinders. Okay, so I think we're all ready. We've got the dowels in, yeah, we've got all the oil weight dowels are in. So we've got the pillar studs in, and there's one new one in, because I wasn't happy with one of these pillar studs, the thread in the internal thread in the pillar stud. I wasn't happy. I've tested them, double tested by screwing all the cylinder head bolts into them to make sure that they are all okay. I just mentioned that there was someone doing a similar thing on YouTube. They're sort of refurbishing a T160, and I must say I had a bit of a wry grin when I found out that they didn't really do all these checks. And they put the whole thing together, this, that and the other, then they came to torque the heads down, and sure enough, one of these bolts, they were torquing them down, and suddenly, oh, hang on a minute, and that was it, the thread had gone. And so the only thing to do is to then take the whole damn thing apart again, and mend it. So I did have a right smile, because that's why it's so important to check all these things, before you put them together. Okay, so then I'm going to put well seal on. I'll just mention what I'm going to do is I'm going to also put well seal on the bottom of the sort of push rod tubes around the tappet blocks, because I can get to the back of the tappet blocks with my little paintbrush much easier when the cylinder head isn't on. And it doesn't matter, because with well seal it never sets, so it's not like you're going to put it on and then, oh quick, we better put the things on before it sets. No, don't worry. The only thing you have to worry about is you put it on too early, obviously it will attract dust and stuff because it's always sticky. But just a little thing, I always put the well seal on here on the tappet blocks as well as on the head before I put the head on, otherwise it's very difficult to get well seal around to the back of the blocks. And just because I've not shown it before, this is how I generally put well seal on. Stag well seal. So you just have a little paintbrush, little craft brush, and simply just use it out a bit and simply just paste it on, paint it on, and that's it. Okay, and then you can't put too much on, but you only want a smear, and this is by far the easiest way. The only thing that you can remove well seal with is cellulose thinners. That's the word I'm looking for. Cellulose thinners. So I always use the stuff. It's actually cleaner for UPVC windows that I can buy from the UPVC window shop, surprisingly enough. And if you use that, well seal just comes off like it wasn't there. But that's the only thing that will get it off. I'll show you later on. But yeah, well seal, all you do, little brush. Obviously in this case we're making doubly sure that we've got the well seal around these little oil ways. Can we see that? Yeah. Because it's these that tend to leak oil. And I'm sure I was going to say something else there, but I can't remember. Oh yeah, so you just paint this on, and you have to leave it for 10 minutes or so before assembly. It just kind of goes off in some way, but then it never ever hardens. It's a non-hardening gasket cement, so it always stays liquid, which is good for when you come to disassemble as well, because when you disassemble, then all you need to do is heat the cases around a particular joint that you want to remove, and that liquefies the well seal, and the gasket will just come apart. If you try and do it when it's still cold, you'll find that the well seal won't let go. But yeah, so unlike certain things of back in the day, dare I say the words, hang on, red hematite, that's enough to send a few guys into a sort of some kind of a fit, Those of us who've been around bikes for a long time, red hematite, my God. Anyway, there we go. We all used to use red hematite at one time, my God. Anyway, this is a non-hardening gasket cement, and it's just brilliant. I think I was told that it was developed by Rolls-Royce or for Rolls-Royce many years ago. I'm not sure, but it is fantastic stuff. Don't ask me why it works so well. I've no idea what's in it or anything, but it does. It's amazing that none of my British bikes leak oil. Touch wood, famous last words. Mainly because of well seal. Anyway, there we go. I'll just keep painting this on. Then I'll put it on the cylinder block as well, and I'll put it on the tappet blocks because I can get to them while the head's still off, and then we'll put the head on. Nearly done. Right, let's get the cylinder head on then. So well seal's all on, it's gone off. I've got the gasket, I threw it that way up, make sure I've got the gasket on the right way round. Yes. it won't go on the wrong way around. It'll go down, but then it won't line up with the oil dowels. Just make sure it's seated nicely. Especially around those pesky oilways. Yeah, that's all on good. Okay, and so the cylinder head, obviously make sure I got it around the right way. Yeah, everything ready there. Oh, no. Okay, just checking there wasn't dirt on it. The valves, and yeah, we've already put well seal on the top of the tappet blocks, ready to put the push rods on. Well seal on here. Head round the right way. There we go. Okay, that's good. It's down to the dowels, the oil dowels, and then just needs tapping down over the oil dowels. So then I'll loosely put in the outer 4 cylinder head studs. These are stainless steel. And they've got extra thick washers on which only go up one way. Again, nice piece of kit. I'm just loosely going to put these in. Just oiled the threads slightly to make sure they go in nicely. Yeah, I don't want to over tighten these, just get them down, hold everything in place. And next up we'll put the push rod tubes in and the rocker boxes on. And just to mention that if you want any more detailed information about what's on the videos, then there is the workshop manual that goes alongside the videos, and that covers restoring the whole bike, not just the engine. And that's available from all good booksellers around the world. You can just put my name, Chris Rook, into the search bar, like Amazon search bar or wherever, and it should come up.